From the crossroads of the Ozarks, it's PID Radio. Welcome, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we are just delighted you've chosen to join us once again on this adventure. Boy, 20 years of adventure.
20 years, yes.
We're in our 21st year now.
That is correct. We are the OGs. Not just of Christian podcasting, but of podcasting.
Of podcasting.
Yes.
One of the very first podcasters out there.
We were in within 6 months of them inventing the code. And I would be really curious to know how many of those podcasts that were being produced back in March of 2005 are still podcasting.
Well, it may just be us.
Yeah.
Not that there are very many, because even today, podcasts come and go.
They do. And yet they can't get rid of us. Leave it. If you get a spare moment, please take a moment to download our free app that gets all of our content, including the archives going all the way back to 2005. Look under PID Radio Classic VFTB, and you'll find archives going back some of our first interviews with some of the people who have been very influential in our lives, like Dr. Tom Horn, Dr. Mike Heiser, L.A. Marzulli, Chuck Missler, Noah Hutchings, people who are no longer with us. You'll find them in the archives. There is a search function. If you're interested, you can go in and use the search function to search for your favorite speaker. We've got all of the interviews tagged so that you can find very quickly all of the interviews featuring whoever you want to, whoever it is you're looking for. That app is a really powerful little tool.
I actually use that tool as well, because you and I have had so many discussions, not just in PID Radio, but also in your View from the Bunker podcast, in our Gilbert House Fellowship. We've had a couple of guests on that over the years, but also we've been doing Unraveling Revelation, Sci Friday. We have been doing a lot of programs together since 2005, and many of those are available on the app. And I love searching for guests from long ago. That Lieutenant Colonel Dan Marvin is one of them. We just recently had the JFK files that were released.
Yes.
Whether or not there was anything that JFK researchers weren't aware of, I'd be really surprised about that. But if you are curious to know what may have actually caused all of that event to happen, then you can read through those files, thousands of pages, if you feel led to do that. But Dan Marvin was one of the individuals connected to that, directly connected to the aftermath of it. Right.
We saw him on one of the programs produced by, History Channel back in the day, The Men Who Killed Kennedy. And we saw Dan Marvin interviewed there, and then saw that he'd come out with a book titled Expendable Elite, about how the government has used and lied about its use of, Green Berets. Because during the Vietnam War, then Captain Marvin led a team of Green Berets inside the borders of Cambodia, because they were chasing down the North Vietnamese that were using Cambodia as a safe haven, because President Johnson has said, we will not attack Cambodia. And so they were sent in there and told, if you get caught or captured, or injured, we will deny all knowledge. You'll be there on your own. So anyway, that led to a friendship with Colonel Marvin. And he'd come to know the Lord. And boy, he got really emotional when talking about his grandson wanting to join the military and become a special forces operator like his grandfather, because he was so proud of his grandfather. And Dan was just really torn up about that, because he didn't want his grandson to go through what he'd experienced.
Right. And you might say today, sometimes these patrols that go into areas that we're not supposed to be, it's sort of like a Mission Impossible mission, but there's sometimes called ghost patrols or ghost battalions, because they are not there.
Yeah. This was one of the reasons that the story that came out this past week from Lithuania was disturbing.
It really bothered me, and I haven't followed up on that this morning.
Well, not this morning.
Well, they were found, then they weren't found.
Right. What was found, here, the story, if you've not heard about this, that 4 U.S. soldiers were reported missing this week during military exercises in Lithuania.
Air quotes. Military exercise.
In air quotes, because it was near the border with Belarus.
Exactly.
Now, Belarus is a close ally Alexander Lukashenko, the president there, is very close allies with Vladimir Putin and with Russia. So when news comes out that 4 U.S. soldiers in Lithuania, and bear in mind these Baltic states now, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, are members of NATO, right up against the border with Russia and Belarus. When 4 U.S. soldiers go missing close to the border with Belarus, it's like, okay, are things about to get really hot there? Then the report the next day came out, well, they've been found. And then the following day, it's like, wait, no, they've not found.
They've been found dead.
They've been found dead, right. But now they've come back and said, no, they've not been found, but their armored vehicle was found. Apparently, it had been driven into a peat bog and was found in about 16 feet of water. The soldiers had not been found. So the question now remains as, did they inadvertently drive into the peat bog? Was it not properly marked on the map? Were the soldiers abducted and the vehicle driven into the bog to cover it up?
Exactly.
Don't know. We don't know as of this point.
Belarus might have assumed that they crossed the line. In other words, they may have drifted into Belarus.
Yeah.
That can happen. You don't have dotted lines on the ground saying, oh, look, I'm crossing into Belarus. Also, Lithuania, I believe, is the state that has a Russian little swath that goes through it.
Yes, there's a corridor that extends to the little Russian enclave. Something, I don't think that's the name of it, but there's a corridor that extends from Russia to the Russian enclave. And I forget what the name of that little city is there that, anyway, as of yesterday afternoon, they are still saying the soldiers are still missing. There's a rescue operation to recover. It's being described, and this is reported at CBS News, that it's a rescue operation to recover 4 missing U.S. soldiers from their submerged vehicle. So search and rescue teams on the scene using heavy military equipment to remove silt from the water so they can get to it, because it's a bog. You can't actually go right up to it and just start digging. But that was as of yesterday afternoon. Polish troops, Lithuanian troops are continuing. I've not seen anything new as of this morning.
How awful for their families.
Right, yeah, because the military had to, and reportedly has, reached out to the family members to let them know that these soldiers have been missing. But yeah, nothing new. New York Times quoting an Army source is saying recovery from the swamp is incredibly difficult. So
it would be.
It is. Again, the question was, and my first thought when we saw the story was, oh boy, okay, they are the tripwire that's going to drag the United States and NATO into open war with Russia. Right. This is what this appears to be the goal of European politicians who are acting as though they are just completely detached from reality on a number of things.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, first of all, they seem to think that they've got a chance if they go to war with Russia. I've been looking at American military analysts for a while, honest analysts, and they will report on tabletop exercises being done by think tanks. And again, the team representing the United States in a ground war in Eastern Europe is overwhelmed by Russia.
Well, I think that may be one of the reasons that President Trump once has said that he may leave NATO, because he doesn't want our country dragged into a war if the EU is so insistent upon it.
Yeah.
Because there is a paragraph in the NATO treaty, Article 5, that if any NATO nation is involved in a war, all the other nations have to become involved in the war, which means if Lithuania is attacked by Belarus.
Yep. And of course, that would bring Russia in on the side of Belarus. And this is not to say that we think that the United States military is not staffed and run by soldiers who are well-trained and well-equipped. Obviously, there are problems as we look at some of the inefficiencies, and especially over the last, say, 16 years. since
beginning with Clinton.
Well, yeah, even beginning with Clinton, where he was shutting things down. But you look at the procurement process and the fact that we've got $800 hammers or whatever, money's being shunted off somewhere else. Black ops, but also probably into the bank accounts of certain people. It's not as overt as it is in Ukraine. I saw a video clip of Tucker Carlson talking about this. Said, you go to Europe, he said, and he's witnessed this himself. The people driving around in the really nice cars and spending lots and lots of money, said they're all Ukrainian. Because you've got the people at the top of Ukrainian society who are siphoning off money that's being sent by the EU and by the United States as aid, and selling up to half of the weapons that we have sent them to fight Russia, selling them on the black market, winding up. And this was reported by Europol. It is Interpol, excuse me, not Europol, Interpol, that many of these weapons are winding up in the hands of armed criminal gangs elsewhere in Europe. And so they're skimming, but it probably happens everywhere. I mean, that's human nature, sadly.
It absolutely does. That is sadly human nature.
Right. And the United States military, as I was starting to say, over the last 16 years, has put more of a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion rather than on just getting the best soldiers for the position. There are certain roles for which women are better suited, but frontline soldiers on the ground is not one of them.
But beyond the manpower, the humans involved, there are artillery vehicles, ships, tanks, planes, that many of them are old and need to be replaced. And I understand that the previous administration sent some of the older parts of our what am I trying to say? The
Arsenal,
thank you very much, to Ukraine. And the thinking there was, we'll send them the old stuff and it's still good, but, it's like sending them a used car. It still works, but, needs some work. And we will replace it. So that gives money to the manufacturers here in the United States. So the theory is that when you send 10 billions of aid, that a large portion of that goes to domestic manufacturers. And to a certain extent, that is true. But takes a long time from day one to here it is. You can use it on the field, in the field. It takes 10 years sometimes more, because these things, as they're manufactured, need to be tested to make sure that this particular unit works well, blah, blah, blah. And sometimes there are changes, there have been modifications, there have been improvements.
Right.
One example is that the F-35 that has been traditionally sort of a lemon.
Yep.
Why is that? It's a Boeing.
No, Lockheed Martin.
Lockheed Martin. Sorry, Boeing.
Boeing Starliner, which was supposed to bring the astronauts back home last fall and had to leave them up there because of problems. Yeah. And then they were left up even longer because the Biden administration didn't want to let Elon Musk send SpaceX to get them, which they finally did.
Yeah. So they're back home.
Anyway, but yeah, there are problems with quality control. And again, this is evident in the F-35. It's also evident in the Starliner and other aspects of the American. And there are a lot of reasons for it. We are not as proficient in educating our students in STEM as we used to. And
that was a goal that got dropped when DEI came in.
Right. Because you can't expect
certain people to understand mathematics.
Yeah. Come on. That's racist. Yeah.
Look,
in addition,
that's unfair. I'm sorry, but it's totally unfair. No child should have someone come along and say, well, based on your appearance or based on your whatever, we're pretty sure you can't understand math. So you're going to be sent over here and just sort of pushed through.
We're not going to require you to actually learn this to be passed.
I'm sorry, but that's ridiculous, because no matter what skin color, no matter what background, every child should be given the chance.
Yeah. And it's not training them for the real world. There's a story out recently about why corporations are not wanting to hire recent college graduates because they've come through college after 4 years. Part of it was during COVID, but they've come through without being expected to perform to a certain level and to turn in work on time. And so they get into the real world and it's like, well, why isn't this project done? I just wasn't feeling it today. Okay, well, here, feel this. This is your pink slip. Yeah. We're living down to the expectations that are being set. Beyond that, there's just a certain supply chain problem in that we don't, and this is something that President Trump is trying to address and why liberals' heads are exploding. 25% tariff on all imported automobiles beginning next week.
Well, good.
And
locally then.
Exactly. This is also why he's applied tariffs on imported steel and aluminum. If we're not making the raw materials, steel and aluminum, with which we can make automobiles, and those auto factories that during World War II were converted over to make tanks and jeeps and airplanes. If we get into a war and we're suddenly expecting the company, and we're fighting the country that we're buying the steel from,
yes,
to keep sending us steel, well, we might as well put the knife to our throats right now. So that's what President Trump is trying to reverse.
Am I remembering correctly? Was it Hyundai that said that they were going to build several factories here?
Right. And Honda is also moving a manufacturing plant from Mexico to Indiana.
I raised my hand a minute ago. Derek and I, we sort of had this signal, and sometimes we cross signals, but I raised my hand a second ago because when you were talking, when we were discussing STEM.
Yeah.
When I was in college studying biology in the early 90s, many of my pre-med and genetics fellow students, as I went from the big lecture hall classes to the smaller classrooms because fewer and fewer students wanted to go that route because it was difficult. The ones that got into the smaller classrooms with me tended to be, many of them were like myself, not necessarily an older student, but a very dedicated student. But I had several older student friends in those smaller classes. But also there were a number of them from India and China. Because universities in certain programs, I don't know if they've been given a quota that you have to fill or what it is, but a lot of them have had, then at least, were accepting undergrads, not just graduate students, but undergrads from other countries. And the countries were paying their way. And they had to take the courses the country wanted and then return home to take that knowledge there. It makes me think of the 1,000 Talents program.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if that was going on back then.
Well, good question. I remember when I was in college back in the early 80s, and I was at a small liberal arts school, Knox College, Galesburg, Illinois, which had less than 1,000 students at the time. We had a surprisingly high number of students from Malaysia.
Now that's interesting.
Yeah. In fact, there was a Malaysian house on campus where all of them would live together.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. And it was maybe 3 or 4 dozen, but, it wasn't like, 20%.
Recruiting from Malaysia?
I don't know. We also had a fellow named Mahmoud who was who was from Iran. He literally would go home and fight in the war against Saddam Hussein and Iraq on his break.
Yeah.
He was trained in some sort of martial arts. I mean, I remember he demonstrated once in a room with an 8-foot ceiling, which most ceilings are. He could jump, kick, and plant his foot flat against the ceiling and then land on his feet again. Yeah, it was pretty remarkable. Anyway.
I had a fellow student who was from Kuwait, and every time I would see him, he would say, "I just love Americans." Kuwait, this was at the time, early 90s, this was at the time that Kuwait was, quote unquote, liberated from Iraq.
Oh, right.
The first Iraq war.
Yeah, was it April Glaspie, the ambassador to Iraq, who told Saddam Hussein, "We don't have any interest in your Arab conflicts," which kind of gave him the signal that it was okay to go in and invade.
Yeah.
Apparently Kuwait was slant drilling and they were drilling from their side of the border into the oil fields of Iraq. Anyway.
In a Simpsons episode? slant drilling.
Probably.
Mr. Burns slant drilling underneath the high school or the grade school.
Yeah, they've done everything long enough. The Simpsons have probably
they've done it all
everything.
Exactly. But another thing, and I forgive me if I'm stepping on something you were about to say.
No,
we cannot forget to talk about the earthquake.
Yeah, speaking of that part of the world, Southeast Asia, Myanmar and Thailand have both been affected. Myanmar
used to be called Burma.
Burma, right? A very poor nation, and it's in the middle of a civil war, so information is tightly controlled. So the information coming out of Myanmar has been slow. As of yesterday afternoon, they were only reporting it like 145 dead or something, and now it's thousands.
Yeah.
But it was a 7.7 magnitude. It was followed by a 6.2 magnitude aftershock. But across the border in Thailand, there was a 33. We see that number a disproportionate amount of times.
Yeah, you do. You have to wonder, is it the signal? Nudge, wink, wink.
I think so. 33-story building that was under construction with a crane on the top. And when it shook, it collapsed, and there were people who were trapped underneath that rubble. So yeah, just an awful, awful earthquake.
Yeah, you were saying that Myanmar is a poor country. What I read this morning is that so far, the damage estimate exceeds their GDP.
Wow.
So already planes from, assuming they can get in, I don't know if the airport was affected or not, but a large shipment of supplies and aid came from India. India's been very good historically about helping when another country needs it.
Yeah.
I have to say, even though India has some issues, we want to be Hindu and nothing else but Hindu.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes back to when India was part of the British Empire up until the early 20th century. And it was split as India wanted its independence. The Muslims went into Pakistan. Pakistan didn't exist then.
Mm-hmm.
It was split into Pakistan and India. And theoretically, all of the Muslims were given, here you have so many days, go over here on the other side of this dotted line. And not all of them chose to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so you still have some Muslims who live in India, and the current government prefer Hindus.
And seeing it as a nationalistic thing as well as a religious thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's interesting is that you don't hear many people in the West complaining about that the way you do complaints about Israel being Jewish.
I mean, imagine if there were a country, well, New York, probably more per capita Jews live in New York City, say, than in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
So what if New York City said, we've got a lot of Jews, so we would prefer to just be Jewish. Or if the Christians living in New York City, you've got a lot of Catholics who live in New York City.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We prefer to just be Christian. That would be, everybody would shout about that.
Yeah. The constitutional protection of, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That has been weaponized in recent years by the Satanic Temple, mainly, which really is run by an atheist.
Yeah,
he claims.
Well, he's got another thing coming, as they used to say.
Well, yeah,
he doesn't seem to understand that Satan is real.
Yeah, but they use the concept of Satan and the notion that they are doing certain things as part of their worship, to argue for the constitutional protection afforded to the free exercise of religion to protect things like abortion. We consider it a sacrament. Oh, do you know? Okay. They tried that here in Missouri, and Missouri Supreme Court, state Supreme Court struck it down and said, nope. That's not what you're doing.
I love Missouri.
Yeah. The state, generally speaking, is pretty sensible. And our Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, has really done some rather high profile, some bold things, like going after China and winning a judgment against China for like $25 billion. And said if China doesn't pay, he's going to start confiscating farmland purchased by Chinese corporations here in Missouri.
Oh,
No. Anyway,
that would be nice.
We may find ourselves in a situation where American Christians may have to consider that to preserve the type of country that we had years ago that led to America being great, founded on Christian principles. I suppose you could call it Judeo-Christian, but Christian is just an outgrowth of Judaism. So Christian principles as listed in the Bible, as given to us in the Word of God, and saying, look, if you disagree with us, you're free to do what you want to do, but don't try to use this law against us to allow for these things that we think are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to try to claim this is a sacrament, well, either abide by the law or get out.
Yeah. It's very difficult. Many ministries find it helps the ministry with the books to become a 501c3.
Yeah.
And that we have a lot of friends in ministry who are 501c3s. So everyone needs to make their own choice. Derek and I, we're just the two of us, and we've just decided it never really mattered. We don't want that possibility that at some point that government tax protection would allow the government to come in and tell us what we can and cannot say.
Right.
Generally, we like that freedom. We have tinfoil hats and we want to say certain things, and the day may come that we'll say something that gets us kicked off certain platforms, which is why you need the app.
Right.
Because it's a Christian company that runs and designs the app. But because of that, and this is why a lot of ministries do this, again, it helps the bottom line. You don't have a whole lot of money to start with, and you want to hang on to what little money you have for that reason. We just pay the taxes on it.
Yeah.
And we would rather do that and have the freedom to talk.
Yeah. And the other thing, and I can say this because I sit on the board of directors for Skywatch TV, which is 501c3. And it's 501c3 because some of the Christian television networks, when Tom Horn was setting up the network, found that some of the networks required that it be a 501c3 to carry the program. Now, I don't know if that's because of FTC regulations. I don't think that's the case with all of the networks.
I don't know.
But anyway, so we incorporated as a 501c3, and there are certain things that we have to do in accordance with the law that are really, it's like, okay, if the two of us were to become a 501c3, we'd have to have a board of directors. And we'd have to file certain paperwork, which would mean we'd have to hire legal counsel.
Exactly.
We'd have to, so the cost of doing it would require that we have to bring in extra money just to pay for being a nonprofit.
I know.
It's like, that doesn't make any sense.
I know. It's one of the reasons that you and I decided to close down our shipping physical products store. Because it was getting to the place where, thank you very much, you guys were so good about ordering from us that we were going to have to hire someone. And we would never have expected someone to just come in and volunteer.
Oh, no.
No, we would have hired someone, which you get into that position of, I've hired this person. I want to make sure that you have a job. I've given you a job and I'd like for you to keep it. So you have to make sure that you make enough to keep that person on. And we, again, Derek and I really like it just being the two of us. Many of you out there support us, and thank you. Some of you just out of the blue, out of the kindness of your heart, you support us every month. You guys, seriously, for years, some of you for years and years have generously given to us every month. So we really appreciate that. And all of you who stepped up to help with the barn.
Yes.
Gonna fix a barn. We're gonna raise that barn. Well, the barn was already there, but we fixed it on the inside. And I was looking at some photos that I think it was probably Matthew from the Southwest Radio Church Ministries. Several of those wonderful guys came out here to record programs with Skywatch TV, but they also came to our barn to record programs. And so I think it was Matthew who was taking pictures of the various iterations. You know, one guy would sit down, then another guy would come and sit down, and you were interviewing them on a couple of our sets. And when I first saw it, I thought, that's really, hey, that's our barn.
Yeah.
that looks really good.
And it was done very affordably.
Yeah.
And, but again, we would have had to borrow money one way or another to do it had we done it ourselves. So thank you for making that possible. Just looking out there and seeing a cardinal sitting on the fence. That's the...
if you can hear the bird in the background, that's what is singing. It's a cardinal.
Yeah, male cardinal. Yeah. Baseball season, Cardinals, Cubs, Blue Jays. Yeah, well, we haven't seen any Cubs out there, but definitely Cardinals and Blue Jays.
I would not see Cubs out there. I really would rather not.
Well, hey, some exciting news this week. And we'll talk about it after the break. The CIA is hunting the Arks. Not just one Ark, but 2 Arks. We'll explain when PID Radio returns.
Thousands of years ago, giants walked the earth. They are long gone, but their spirits remain. The evidence is there for those with eyes to see. Megalithic tombs, monuments aligned with the stars, and the words of the prophets and apostles recorded in Scripture. Now, see this evidence for yourself as Derek and Sharon Gilbert take you on a tour of the Holy Land with special guests Pastor Carl Gallups and Messianic Rabbi Zev Porat. From the mountain where the story began to the mountain where it all ends. Wars of the Gods, Volume 2, Search for the Rephaim. Available now in DVD and HD streaming video. Online at gilberthouse.org.
Welcome back to PID Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and we want to remind you about our trip to Israel.
We will be there October 19th through 30th of 2025 with special guest Carl Teichrieb, author of the book Game of Gods. Highly recommended.
Oh, yeah. And Leanne Teichrieb will be coming along, too. For those of you who like Carl, but you really like Leanne even better, listen, she is the secret behind his ministry.
She is a lot of fun. Both of them are a lot of fun, but
I love them both.
Highly intelligent. And so this will be like a rolling conference through the Holy Land as we will be giving various talks, Q&A sessions in the evenings to go along with what we'll be seeing during the day. And the sites that we will see, I mean, this is not your typical tour of Israel. We'll be going to Gilgal Rephaim, the Serpent Mound of Bashan, but also a couple of other sites that hardly anyone in Israel knows about. The Shamir Dolmen, that's the one with the 50-ton capstone on top of this dolmen, this megalithic funerary monument that goes back.
It's out of the Flintstones.
It does.
A really thick capstone.
Yes, and Cherbet Betecha, which we think, it's very similar to Gilgal Rephaim. It's a megalithic structure, probably close to 6,000 years old.
Yeah.
But we think that is where Jesus was baptized. We'll tell you why. So 3-day extension to Jordan, that is optional, but you do want to go, as long as you're over there, come with us over to Jordan, visit Petra, see the red desert of Wadi Rum where they filmed Lawrence of Arabia, and we will visit one of the sites that was one of the hideouts for Lawrence, T.E. Lawrence. Yeah, during World War I. More information and registration is at our website, gilberthouse.org/travel.
Ooh, that's going to be a whole lot of fun. And of course, next spring, we're going to go as well. You can go to gilberthouse.org/travel, as Derek said. Yeah, all the details are there, regardless of when we go.
Yeah, that'll be the Iron and Myth Tour. Doug Van Dorn, Judd Burton have confirmed, still waiting to hear back from Timothy Alberino, but he's in the jungles of Peru, we see from his social media feeds this week.
Yeah, his communications.
Yes. So, the CIA and the Arks. This is bizarre for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's just bizarre that the CIA.
Up to me.
It does. But what's even more bizarre is that this is in the news now.
No, it's old.
Because it's old news. Right, exactly. These documents that reveal what the CIA was trying to accomplish. They were looking for the Ark of the Covenant and also for Noah's Ark. But the documents that reveal this were declassified 25 years ago. So why is it in the news now?
Good question.
This is always what we think you need to ask whenever, I'm trying to go here to.
Are we being distracted?
Well,
look over here, sleight of hand.
Yeah, exactly. That is truly the question. The remote viewing aspect is the strange thing about the Ark of the Covenant. I went through and I read the 19-page file. It does not say that it was found, but that's what the headline at Daily Mail says. Daily Mail, secret CIA files claim Ark of the Covenant has been found. All right. Again, it's 2025. This document was declassified in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
And what it describes is an attempt by remote viewer number 32.
Yeah.
Who was given coordinates to locate a target. They described the Ark of the Covenant somewhere in the Middle East. This was in 1988.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody sent me a question and said that one of the remote viewers, Ed Dames, who was part of the program years ago, described this on Coast to Coast AM when Art Bell was still hosting it. I said, well, it's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. But remote viewer 32 described the target as a container. The container as another container inside of it. The target is fashioned of wood, gold, and silver, and is decorated with a seraphim. Okay, a six-winged angel.
It actually said seraphim.
Yeah, although they misspelled it, they spelled it Serapin, Serapin.
Yeah, I'll say seraphim. Most would describe that as two angels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the cherubim, or the cherubim as it's properly pronounced, is are what were on top of the ark.
Right, they're throne guardians.
They are throne guardians. They are not the effeminate winged humans that are usually depicted on replicas of the ark. Somebody sent me a note saying, I'm more interested in the replica that Donald Trump has at Mar-a-Lago. It's like, well, look, we got one on the set at Skywatch TV.
Like, come look at it there.
Yeah, you don't see it on camera, but it's against the back wall. As you're watching Skywatch TV, there is a replica. But again, even that one has the two winged, effeminate angel type creatures, whereas the cherubim looked more like sphinxes. Or like the Lamassu, the winged, human-headed bull-like creatures that were outside the palace at Nineveh, the palace of the Assyrian king.
Right.
So either way, it's not accurate. But no, the so-called Serapin,
and they're also looking for the Ark of Noah. Yeah,
Noah's Ark. Now, that was the other ark that they were looking for, and this is the Darupanar formation that Rick Renner was telling us about.
Exactly.
You can find that discussion on one of our recent episodes of the Bible's Greatest Mysteries, available at our app and our Roku and Apple TV and Amazon Fire TV channels. Plug. Go back and look at that, because I've got some drone footage that I included in the program to show you this Darupanar formation.
Good.
Or go to dailymail.co.uk and you can find the story. But it's, skeptics for years been saying, no, that's a natural formation.
Well, based on things that Rick Renner said to us when we were interviewing him on the Skywatch TV set, and also when you and I interviewed him for the Bible's Greatest Mysteries, it seems to me that there's a whole lot more than just a formation there. Yeah. There's some good evidence. And this has been considered a prime candidate for the site since, I think, 1948, when it was I think a Turkish Air Force officer named Darupanar, which is why they call it the Darupanar formation. But according to the CIA file, which was declassified in 2002, so this one's 2002, the Ark of the Covenant file declassified in 2000. The U.S. intelligence community has been looking at this spot since 1957. And CIA Director William Colby. Oh, really? Directed. That's interesting. Yeah. 1982, on 13 May 1974, this is a report from 1982, DCI, Director of Central Intelligence, CIA Director William Colby, sent a letter to the DS&T Sayre Stevens asking if the agency had any evidence of Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat. Mr. Colby said that Lieutenant Colonel Walter Brown of the U.S. Air Force Academy had asked whether it would be appropriate or possible to exploit satellite photography to examine the glacier systems there to see whether any evidence of the Ark could be found, end quote. Now, why was the CIA interested in this? Don't know. Why was the CIA interested in tasking a remote viewer with finding
the Ark of the Covenant. Now, again, they describe something that doesn't look like what was described in the Bible. So no, the Ark of the Covenant has not been found. And I will remind you that the prophet Jeremiah said that when Judah is returned to the land, the Ark will not be thought of, nor will not be seen, nor will not be made again. Will not be thought of anymore. It will not be made again. So after Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple in 586 BC, Ark was gone. We're not going to see the Ark again until, I think it's Revelation chapter 11, verse 19. I'm going to have to look that up to make sure I'm not giving you the wrong verse. But that's the next time we see the Ark, and that's when John says the clouds parted and he saw into the throne room of God. That's where the Ark is now. It is not on earth anymore. That's my view.
By the way.
Yeah, I was right, 1119.
By the way, William Colby is the CIA director who had that mysterious death.
Oh, yeah.
His canoe.
Went out in his canoe on Chesapeake Bay, and the canoe came back alone.
Rock Point, Maryland was where his home was. He went out on a tributary of the Potomac. 0.25 miles from his home, so just a quarter of a mile away. His body was found in a marshy riverbank lying face down not far from where his canoe was found. But the autopsy ruled it accidental, even though there were some people at the time said that there were questions surrounding it. So there have been a whole lot of conspiracy theories. There's a documentary called The Man Nobody Knew about Colby and whether or not it was possible that he unalived himself. In other words, that he was behind. Is he the one who was CIA director during the Iran-Contra stuff?
I think so. And one of the interesting things about the Iran-Contra affair was that was, let's see, when was that? 1981 to 86. So yeah. Who was involved there? Caspar Weinberger, Oliver North, John Poindexter. Was it
Secord? William Secord? No.
William Casey.
Many of you listening to this may be shouting.
William Casey was Director of Central Intelligence from 1981 to 87, so it wasn't Colby.
Okay, all right. Well, it was a C name. My brain is so bizarre the way I connect things together. So my brain was saying, it starts with a C. It could be Colby.
Yeah, Colby was there from 73 to 76.
Because that's really good. I had Colby cheese for breakfast. I actually did. I had Colby cheese for breakfast. I love cheese.
Cheese, grommet.
I know. I've always loved cheese. They used to call me the little rat back in my family. Oh, well.
Well, anyway, the Darupanar site has been identified as a highly likely location for Noah's Ark. And especially over the last 2 or 3 years, it seems the evidence seems to be coming together. And I know there are others who've got very strong opinions otherwise. Look, we're kind of agnostic on the whole thing. We respect Rick Renner and his scholarship. He's been there. He points to a lot of really good evidence. So that's if we had to nail down one that we think is most likely, that's what we would say.
Yeah, because we really do respect Rick Renner.
Yeah.
I don't think he doesn't do this for sensational reasons. He does it because he believes it.
Right. I mean, you've got some very interesting evidence with the, what they call the drogue stones that were found down in the valley below. And drogue stones were these really heavy stones. They were not anchors, but they were there to keep the ship from rocking too far in rough seas.
Right. There also appears to be an altar.
Yes.
Nearby.
Right. And
local legend.
Right. So I think the big question is, why would you have drogue stones, which are for seagoing vessels in Turkey, hundreds and hundreds of miles away from the closest deep body of water? I mean, the Caspian Sea would really be the closest thing. So anyway, but here's what I'm wondering. why you would have the Air Force requesting the CIA to use surveillance techniques and satellite surveillance, aerial surveillance to find the Ark of the Covenant, why the CIA would task essentially remote viewer, which is an occult practice. It's really, what do they call it? Out of body experience. It's astral projection, astral travel. Trying to weaponize that occult practice to find the Ark of the Covenant. It just smacks of the work of the SS under Heinrich Himmler in World War II.
Yes, but the things that were being done in Germany up to and during World War II were also being done here. Mm-hmm. And I've been reading Levenda's books, Peter Levenda's books, who writes really insightful examinations of high weirdness here in the United States, but also with regards to World War II as well. There's a book called Unholy Alliance where he gets into a lot of the details regarding the occult aspects of the war from Germany's point of view, but also the other side of it, the United States engaging in, people in England, spies in England engaging in. You get, oh gosh, why can't I think of his name?
Aleister Crowley.
Aleister Crowley, thank you very much. You knew. Aleister Crowley, who I was picturing him and you just totally knew. Aleister Crowley, who was over in New York, he was in Washington, he was in London, he was up in Scotland, he was in Germany.
Yeah.
He was all over the place, ostensibly to promote the OTO, to help solidify the rules of OTO, what it was that they stood for and what it was that they wanted. And many of those were based on his own visions, the books that he would write for his Telema.
Or what was being shared with him from the unseen realm. Exactly.
That's what I'm saying. Telema, he claims he was downloaded. It was downloaded to him when he was in Egypt with his first Whore of Babylon wife. He always had these wives that he called the Whores of Babylon. And he called himself, the
Great Beast 666. Yep.
Exactly. He claimed that came from his mother calling him that. I don't know. But Aleister Crowley was a weird guy. And unless he had some sort of last minute conversion, seeing the truth and actually asking Christ into his life, he very quickly realized he was wrong.
Yep.
And he was lied to by this entity.
Yep.
Because it was a demon or a fallen angel claiming to be this creature, Lamb, Lam, and downloading all of this information to him. And some of it, it was this idea of do as thou wilt is the whole of the law.
Right. Every man does what he
what is right in his own eyes. Exactly. Yeah. So, sadly, it was not only Germany involved in the occult.
No.
Or is it only, I think that you get aspects of that in many governments worldwide, because every government, essentially every tribe, has an angel, a fallen angel. The only angel who was sent down post-Babel who did not fall is Michael.
Yeah. And Gabriel.
He's in charge of Israel. No, I'm talking about
okay.
Israel.
Yeah. In Sherbs.
Michael
Right.
is the angel of Israel.
That is correct. There does seem to be a strong element of the occult in many of these intelligence communities. Journalist and author John Ronson wrote the book The Men Who Stare at Goats, which has got a rather comic title, and the movie that was developed from the book was played for laughs, which is tragic because this was and Ronson has got a sense of humor, and he wrote some humor into the book, but what he was covering is very serious.
Yeah.
It showed the United States spending a lot of money through the military to try to weaponize the occult. The Men Who Stare at Goats described a program whereby men were tasked with trying to make the hearts of experimental animals, goats, make their hearts explode or make their brains, have aneurysms or whatever, to kill them just by thought. Because it was thought, hey, if we could teach our soldiers how to do this on the battlefield, we could use Well, imagine if you could send assassins to take out the leaders of a foreign nation in a way they could never, ever be caught because there'd be no weapons, there'd be no smoking gun, as it were. Well, okay, but this is an occult practice. You're trying to use black magic, essentially, as if any magic was good. You're trying to use magic to try to kill.
Yes, but looking at it, quote unquote, scientifically, do you remember the movie Scanners?
Yes.
It was that same idea.
Right. Scary. Boy, I found that movie really scary.
It was.
Michael Ironside, the actor who played the villain in that film.
Yep.
Really good at playing villains.
Very.
There were other practices. General Albert Stubblebine, who I've seen show up lately as guests on podcasts and other interview programs, to comment on military matters. Like, you do remember, this is the guy who thought he could walk through walls, who kept trying to walk through walls. And that was in the film. I think he was the character played by Stephen Lang.
Oh,
wonderful character actor. Yeah. And so the United States, at least since 1945, after World War II, and we started importing, and I'll put this word in, former
Operation Paperclip.
Operation Paperclip. Yeah. Guys who should have faced justice at Nuremberg were brought into the United States, and their research was then taken up by the CIA and by the U.S. military, which included things like trying to create Manchurian candidates, but creating them by splitting their personalities.
That's in Unholy Alliance.
It's yes, the book Unholy Alliance, but it's also in Peter Levenda's 3-book set called Sinister Forces.
I think they even get into it in book 1 because we used to call it the 6 Degrees of Charles Manson.
And in one of our early interviews with Peter Levenda, which you can find on our app, just do a search using the search function for Levenda.
He's not a Christian, by the way. He actually comes from a journalistic background in New York City and Boston area.
Right.
He has dabbled in the occult. He
is, in all probability, the one who created the print edition of the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
1977. He used the pseudonym Simon. And
remember, his first name is Peter.
Yep. He, I'd never made that connection until just now. Duh.
He was raised a Catholic.
He was, and he has fallen away from the faith.
Yep.
I remember interviewing him once about the Freemasonic influence on the early United States. And he shared that as of that time, now again, this is more than 10 years ago now, that he thought that with proper preparation and purification, you could go into the spirit realm safely, which God was very clear with Moses, don't do this.
Yeah, exactly.
So Levenda wrote quite extensively about this practice of trying to create altered personalities that could then be trained as whatever, linguist, assassin, whatever. But the person, the top level personality would never know that they were harboring these other personalities inside them. And in effect, it's demonically possessed Manchurian candidates. And I asked him if it would be fair to characterize this research as the United States, or at least elements within the United States government, selling its collective soul to Satan to get this technology, to get this information. And he said, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. So that is in effect what we've done. And the Russians have been doing the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Engaging in that sort of research.
These interviews, by the way, they are still in our archives. And because it's a long time ago that we interviewed him, I think the last time we interviewed Peter was probably in 2006 or 7.
Somewhere around there.
Yeah,
I had him on A View from the Bunker once, so it may have been 2009. But anyway.
Yeah. So we don't know how good the equipment was at the time. Not as good as the
audio, pretty bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Early days, it was pretty bad.
But fascinating information if you're looking at this stuff, if you're interested in learning more about it. Just calling it up now here. Peter Levenda, Freemasons and the Founding of America on classic VFTB, and then 2 PID radio interviews, one on Sinister Forces and then one on Nazis and the Occult. So we've got 3 interviews with him in the archives that you can find. It is disturbing to think that we, as a country that identifies as majority Christian, has been engaging in this type of research, probably predating World War II, getting back to the idea of intelligence services engaging in this. As you mentioned, Aleister Crowley was deputized in a manner of speaking by MI6 during World War II. But just after World War II, you had his acolytes, Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard, who was U.S. Navy intelligence, engaging in the Babylon working out there in the desert. And then, of course, the CIA engaging in this sort of research to try to create altered personalities.
And you have to wonder what Hubbard's true motives were.
Right.
For Scientology.
Exactly. We talked quite a while back in the early days of PID radio about a group called the Finders.
Well, you could even find that in the archives. That interview.
Yeah. And it was a group based in Washington, D.C. that authorities were led to after 2 men were arrested in Tallahassee, Florida, with young persons who were clearly not theirs. And these persons clearly had not been treated well.
Well, they said they were taking them elsewhere. You can sort of, we have to be very, very careful about how we put this because of certain rules. But the person who was actually head of all this said that he was intelligence.
What came out of the investigation was that the State Department shut down the investigation. And it was, I don't think any of them claimed that they were, now maybe I'm misremembering.
I think he did. I watched a documentary on it a few years ago. And it was the investigation that was done by an officer who came across the case. And he did not want to let it go.
Yeah.
And he was told to shut it down because this guy was protected.
Right.
He was an intelligence operative or an intelligence informer. I don't know which it was.
Yeah, it was, they were clearly being tasked with something. They were being used by the U.S. government and by the intelligence agencies, but their activities suggest that they were a cult, and part of their cultic activities involved things that we won't discuss here.
No.
So that we don't get this show.
Yeah, you can look it
offline.
up. Seriously, you will find a lot of information.
Go to the FBI's website. The FBI had a document drop a few years back where they released all of this information.
That's what I read it.
Yeah,
young man's name and
when you read the final report of the Metropolitan Police officer who was investigating. Actually, no, he was a customs.
That was it.
He was a customs official, right?
Didn't want to let it go, but.
And you can just see the frustration coming between the lines. No further action will be taken. No further investigation will be conducted.
Yeah, well, sadly, that is a worldwide phenomenon. And it's because human beings are sinful by nature.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's another recent case that has got everybody in an uproar, and that's, of course, Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah.
And Alex Acosta, who was President Trump's Secretary of Labor during his first term.
Well, even P. Diddy. I mean, there are a lot of things coming out. So, yeah, we can't go into it much more than that, but just let's say that mankind has been involved in a whole lot of really bad things. And when you get a little bit of power and a little bit of money, then you can take your bad ideas even farther.
Yeah, and intelligence services often find that sort of activity useful for corrupting others and for turning them into useful assets. Do you want us to reveal what we know about you?
I know.
And so, there's some frustration. We've learned the hard way that we can't say exactly what we're thinking if we want to maintain the Mars Hill
that's just it.
position on certain social media platforms.
Neither one of us is being careful because we fear losing monetization or anything like that. No, it's none of that. We want to maintain the Mars Hill opportunity for as long as possible, but it's also why we really encourage you. The app is free, absolutely free. Download it, have it on your smart device, whatever you want, however you want to consume podcasts. But everything we do is on that app.
Yeah. Well, you'll find that at gilberthouse.org/app. You can also find it at pidradio.com/app. And again, we've got versions for your mobile device or for your smart TV.
Mm-hmm.
So,
everywhere.
Yeah.
Is there a question that we wanted to answer today? Or if we don't have one, then you don't even have to put my question on there.
Well,
by the way, you can, when you download the app, you can go to the conversation area, look on the top right of the app main landing page, and you will see little conversation balloons. And click on that, and you can decide which of the various areas, the forums that you want to engage in. There's one for every program that Derek and I do. And also there are specific ask Sharon a question or ask Derek a question. And I usually try to answer them either on my Armored Sheep podcast or on this, one of our own podcasts that we do together, because it's just easier. Because oftentimes I'm thinking, that's a paragraph to answer that, because it's a great question. But to be fair to the question, it's not just a really quick, and I can barely see the type in these little devices because my eyes are still getting better. They are getting better, and your prayers are being answered. Thank you very much for that, but not quite there yet. Still kind of blurry. I see blurry creatures everywhere.
Yeah.
Blurry to me.
Everything's blurry. Question from Sophie that I've been hanging on to for a while, and I think I may have held on to it too long. She's in Australia and reports they just had a federal election there. Couldn't help noticing that left-wing parties are following the same playbook almost word for word as here in the United States. Very first statement our West Australian premier, who's left-wing, made at the commencement of this campaign was, the right wing are white supremacist, anti-Semitic, and homophobic, and he expressed grave concerns about Andrew Hastie on the right and his stance on the COVID vaccine. He is outspoken against it. This is reported with 3-second sound bites from these politicians as proof. The unbiased anchor then followed his comments with a serious look to the camera while repeating the attack on Hastie and his anti-vaccine leanings. Would you say the left-wing parties in Australia are following the same script as their counterparts in the USA? Short answer, yes.
Yes, there you can actually see, especially on X, you can see identical posts from left-wing contributors and left-wing politicians. Identical posts, like they were sent it to it, and they, okay, now share this on your whatever social media platforms. So they just copied and pasted. They didn't even bother making it, sound like they themselves wrote it. As far as the thing that you get to prevent diseases, I try to be very careful again. Your question included a couple of things.
Oh yeah, the word is sometimes triggers.
That is interestingly enough over here, because we now have a conservative who is in control of our country.
Yeah.
We have open discussion of that particular event in our lives. And some are saying, some in government are now admitting that it really doesn't help. And the narrative is changing.
It is, with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as head of Health and Human Services. And this week, Dr. J, I'm probably going to pronounce his name incorrectly, Bhattacharya, I think.
Sounds good.
He's been approved as the director of the National Institutes of Health, both of whom are, shall we say, skeptical.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Things are changing. And I just looked, the federal election date in Australia has been set for May 3rd. So we didn't miss it.
Well, good.
So glad, Sophie, appreciate your patience. Glad we didn't hold it until after your elections already.
Really are. By the way, if you truly want to be a scientist, your default setting should be skeptical.
Yeah.
It really should. You should be open-minded, but skeptical. So when you get your results from that first experiment, then you repeat it. Mm-hmm. And then you ask another scientist to repeat it, or you repeat it a third time. You have to make sure that what you are getting as your results are reliable. Always be skeptical. And far too many publications are out there now that are quote unquote peer reviewed, and nobody has taken that position.
Yeah, that was one of the points that we made in asking questions about the so-called discovery underneath the pyramids of Giza.
Yeah.
The paper that was published was in an open source journal back in 2022, which means it was not subjected to peer review. But
anybody can.
We understand, but we understand that there is a real scandal amongst scientific journals where peer review is more about gatekeeping than it is about.
Oh, I know.
And many, many hundreds of papers are having to be withdrawn because the data is faked.
I know.
It's flawed, but peer reviewers are really busy. It's like, yeah, okay, I'll give it my rubber stamp.
Because you're a friend of mine and I trust you.
Yeah, but in this case, the folks who claim that there's this vast underground city beneath the pyramids didn't subject it to peer review. At least if you subject it and it gets rejected, then you can make your case and say, look, they rejected it because they didn't understand what we're trying to do. Here's why you should. They didn't even do that. They just went to social media a couple of weeks ago.
Right. You have a scan that you think shows this particular thing. In this case, there might be large areas that appear to be hollow.
Right.
Calling that a vast underground city may be hyperbole. And the artistic representations of that quote unquote city are just representations.
Imagination of the artist.
Imagination, exactly.
Yeah. I would suggest that even if we assume that the official date given for the construction of the pyramids of 2500 BC is wrong because of the evidence of water erosion on the sides of the pyramids, okay, I'm okay with that. But I would suggest that even say 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 years ago, structural engineers would understand you don't put millions of pounds of stone on top of a bunch of 4,000 foot tall columns.
No, probably not.
You put it on bedrock.
Yeah. Well, and that's what I think is going on. So it may be natural formations under there. But before we go, one of the stories that I shared on X this morning, and if you don't follow me on X, it's Sharon K. Gilbert, SharonKGilbert. I put a lot of news there. News that Derek and I talk about, you talk about on your 5 and 10. A lot of stuff is there. One of the stories was an archaeology story in the Judean desert. A pyramid. The remains of a pyramid were discovered. And it is probably from the Ptolemaic era, but also some Antiochus III, I think.
Ptolemaic meaning after Alexander the Great.
Right.
So we're 4th or 3rd century BC. Yeah, that is very interesting.
Made from smaller cut stones. It's not, gigantic, but I just found it interesting that there was a pyramid at all in Israel.
Well, yeah. And there was a lot of war during in the centuries after Alexander the Great between his successor generals, one of whom, what they call them, the Diadochi, or anyway, the 4 generals who split up Alexander's kingdom. And one of them was based in Egypt, another one based in Damascus, led the Syrian kingdom, the Seleucid kingdom that Antiochus Epiphanes eventually produced Antiochus Epiphanes. But the war back and forth, there was a good period of time there where Judea was under the control of the Greek kings of Egypt. And so you can see why they would kind of leave their mark there in the form of a pyramid. Yeah. Very interesting.
Pile of stones.
Yeah. Well, we will be speaking of strange things, aliens, AI, the Antichrist. That is the conference that is coming up just a few weeks out.
I know.
2 weeks.
12th, I think.
10th through 12th.
Yeah.
April 10th through 12th. Here in the Ozarks. And you can see us, Pastor Carl Gallups, Joe Artis Horn, Vicki Joy Anderson, Alan DiDio, Dave Robbins, for free.
Yeah, free. How many conferences do you get to go to for free? Not very many. But if you cannot travel to the Ozarks, and you can stream it for just $25.
Yes.
Now, the free part you have to register.
Yeah.
Because they only have so many seats, and you really do want to get a seat. Otherwise, they're going to have to say, sorry, the fire marshal won't let us let you in because we're out of seats.
That is correct. Oh, Donna Howell. I forgot Donna.
Don't forget Donna. She should be at the top of the list.
Oh, and Dr. Dennis Lindsay. He's written a book on the Nephilim several years back. So looking forward to talking with him, because finding scholars with conservative theology who are saying, yeah, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, is kind of rare. Anyway, more information and registration at readynowexpo.com. Ellie Marzulli will be Skyping in, by the way. readynowexpo.com. So if you can join us, be there, no cost to you. If you want to stay for the weekend, Branson is less than about 20 minutes away. 20, 30 minutes away, and plenty of hotels and motels in Branson.
I just heard Glory go,
Yeah, I think they're saying you've gone more than an hour. So anyway, information at readynowexpo.com, and other events we've got coming up are at our website, gilberthouse.org. Look in the right-hand column there, or go to our app and look under the upcoming events tab under the calendars. Until next time, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and for grace and glory that I get to go outside in a minute. Bye-bye, everybody.
PID Radio is produced by Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Follow us online, Twitter at PID Radio, or the PID Radio page at Facebook. Join us each week for our online Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship, online at gilberthouse.org.